Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I'm super excited to announce the release of my very first book, The Golden Key: Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. If you're ready to alchemize the circumstances in your life so that your abundance expands to an entirely new level in 2021, head over to goldenkey.gift to download the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Samantha Louise here with me on the show. Samantha is a guide for girls and young women to help them become the natural born leaders they were meant to become. Super excited to dive into this topic with you. Hello, Samantha. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. And this is not a topic. I always marvel at, seeing what the unique sort of path that people, in this sort of transformational space take. And there's so many cool little niches. And I just feel like, there's a lot of female listeners of the show. And so as soon as I kind of saw what you did, I thought, I don't think we've exactly had that, went down that path yet. So excited to explore with you. And before we do, I would love to ask you my cliche opener. And it is this: you're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
I would try to keep it pretty short and sweet and just say I'm a leadership cultivator. My goal, my purpose, my calling is to inspire girls and women to come back to their true self. For self-leadership, to be their best person, and then integrate that into whoever else they want to inspire in the world, family, community, or organizations.
Yeah, wonderful. That's what it's all about, right? Is sort of passing on that torch of empowerment and then watching people use it to empower others. That's always like the most exciting part of this work for me, is seeing like, oh, I helped empower this person and now they're out there doing the same thing. And that ROI, that ripple of impact, is like the most rewarding ROI that exists, I think.
Yes, I totally agree.
So if you would give a little bit of, I always like at the top of the show of these soul shares to get a little backstory. So, we know who we're hearing from, kind of what their journey has been, whatever feels relevant to share.
Yeah, I am thinking of like the soul journey or the soul share, as you put it. When I entered adulthood and I was in my career originally as a teacher, I found myself in this space where I had formerly been an athlete, and in college, like a good athlete and a good student. I found myself then in adulthood in this space of like becoming an award-winning educator and being offered just really cool leadership opportunities, and my career exploded in the first few years. But right, I found myself like a lot of other people, starting to question why I didn't feel so happy, so full of joy, so full of like I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Yet I would get home and just feel super burned out and turning to just dysfunctional relationships, dysfunctional behaviors in my own life. So I had to step back and really cut myself off from a lot of the things that were perpetuating that hyperachievement and people pleasing and all of that stuff. So seeing it firsthand with young girls in middle school or late elementary already starting to develop some of these same self-talk patterns, some of these same values and belief systems, experiencing it myself while I was teaching these girls, it made me stop and really question, like, am I doing the best I can in life? And am I really serving other people in a way that's meaningful for them? Or am I
Yeah.
just continuing the status quo myself?
Yeah. Yeah. That seems to be something that a pattern that we all bump up against is like
Yes.
establishing something that's really good and from one perspective, and we were like, this is what we thought we wanted, and it's, we've got it, we've hit the bullseye. Now let's tear it all down and start something new, right?
That's right.
And
Yes.
it's like, oh man. And that's such a journey for all of us to,
Mhm.
it's kind of like we're just putting the sandcastle together, I feel. And
Yes,
then it's like, okay, the tide's coming in. What are you going to build next?
that's
And
right.
so that's a challenging choice to be made, especially after we've put so much into a particular path and we were so sure that it was the path. It
Hmm.
takes a lot of courage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a kind of a pivotal moment with actually a student that I had at one point who was um, talking to me about like her own. It was a middle school girl, and she was talking to me and asking me about like why are so many of our teachers so hyper? Why do so many of our teachers seem like they have to be friends with a certain other teacher? And I just thought from a kid's perspective, like an 11-year-old is picking up on the adult behavior of trying to fit in and trying to be cool. And like that's
Yeah.
what, right? That's what kids are trying to do. But then all of a sudden kids were picking it up with these adults. And I just thought to myself, whoa, this is not okay. This is not healthy. This is not good. And um, if they wanted it to be challenged, if kids wanted that to be different, then who was going to step up and do it? It had to be led by us.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Leading with that example. Well, yeah, I'd love to just hear, okay, from there. So you kind of peeled away from that life, it
Hmm.
sounds like, and started working with, young women and girls to help them kind of, tap into their authentic power. Can you share a little bit about, what that has looked like for you so far?
Yeah, the journey initially for me, leaving an organization and stepping into this global, like, let's just figure out what my path is from here. I was really starting to connect a lot with this kind of divided group of women who were close to the end of their professional career,
Mm-hmm.
and then women who were just emerging out of college and into a career, but knew that they wanted to have a quote unquote leadership role. So I saw these themes, which was really interesting to me between both groups, asking, like, who am I really?
Mm-hmm.
And without this title, if I didn't have this title in an organization, I have no identity.
Right.
So I started to really get curious about what is an identity then,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do we develop a personality or personas? And is that really who we are? Or is that, again, who we've been taught to be and who we've been expected to be? So this journey, I feel like I've been doing my own journey of identifying who I am, stripping back the masks and the personas alongside these women, and a lot of times coming to the conclusion that, I mean, this isn't new news, but coming to the conclusion that we haven't been given permission from other people to be valuable enough to love ourselves or care for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, fall into these certain roles, go do what everyone else is expecting you to do, and that's what makes you valuable and worthy in this world.
Yeah.
So all of that combined with this idea or concept of women in organizations feeling like they have to battle and fight it out to be a leader and to
Mm-hmm.
stay in leadership. So this concept of demasculinizing women
Mm-hmm.
in leadership, also stepping back into womanhood
Mm-hmm.
so that you can be who you like, you can be your authentic self in your organization, in your community, at home, wherever you can be that one person. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be different and code switch everywhere.
Right, right. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's something that I think is really um, been. I think must be really challenging for a lot of women in our culture. This idea that you have to like compete with men and therefore, take on as much masculine energy and tap into as much masculine energy as possible if you want to succeed in a masculine dominated,
Yeah.
culture. And it feels like that narrative is shifting some. And yeah, I'm just curious what you think about that journey and if you see it that way as well. And what can a woman do? Especially, I think of some women, it's probably easier than others. We all have different levels of masculine and feminine energy coursing
Yeah.
through us, right? And so for some, I think if there's more masculine energy there, it's like, okay, I can play this role. I can, get into tech and compete and and then others, I think of an ex-partner. It's like in this moment, I'm remembering her talk about, for some reason, she was so uber feminine, and her talking about like, wow, back in the old days, I would have just been like, fodder for, the world was this tough, really tough place. And I'm just like this very gentle flower. And yet that can be, I then go to thinking of being at a Tony Robbins event years ago, and he would have people stand up. It was a multi-day, 4 or 5 day thing, and he had people stand up throughout the conference. And he had this one guy stand up, and the guy was super masculine, and he would have him interact with different people, and he was just so in his masculine. And then he had this very feminine woman stand up and interact with him. And then Tony stopped and said, "Now, did everyone just observe the way he sort of crumbled in the face of her feminine power?" And so we don't
Yes.
normally think of that, and I don't know that I would even have noticed or would have registered had he not like taken us on this journey and then showed how she sort of was really, in a sense, the more powerful one by being in her feminine, and this uber masculine energy just kind of like crumbled at the soft power. It's like water, right? It ends up dominating everything, and with its softness. And so I'm just curious, what you think about that and how women can translate that into, showing up in a world that expects you to be like the tough biker guy that was standing up in this conference.
Yes, yes, yes. I love it. And I have had a lot of women get triggered and get really, really angry at me around this whole idea of demasculinizing women in leadership.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes it takes a conversation about what you said about women having to compete with men.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, with a lot of women, we go into reflections about how do you compete with other women? Right?
Mm-hmm.
If we know that less than 5% of women in the corporate space ever make it to the CEO level,
Yeah.
why would we ever want to be competing with each other?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what industry, women are in the minority of leaders.
Yeah.
Yet there's this idea of women eating their own on the way to the top,
Mm.
right? So that there's an element of like you said, this feminine power. It doesn't mean that you can't be strong. It doesn't mean that you can't be, it's just that you can't be masculine or have the masculine energy as well, right? Because we all have our own unique special gifts and these different skills and passions that we want to live out in the world. So just because we have a certain passion or a certain vision doesn't make us more or less of who we were destined to be. Again, it's that exploration and uncovering of what's the balance within us, right? And if we're not honoring that balance, we get sick, we burn out, we turn into the fighter, we turn into this really interesting combination of like observing people where they say one thing, their voice does not match, the tone doesn't match what they're saying, the body language doesn't match the tone or the words. So all of this symbology that's coming out of our being is telling us that we're in conflict. It's telling us that we are contradicting our own essence of who we are and where we're going. Right.
Right.
So it's perfect. I love that you bring up the balance of that because it totally it's about when you step into womanhood, the essence of who you are. It doesn't matter what walk of life you come from, what your preferences and all of that stuff are. It's about honing into that really refined identity. What's
Right.
your higher truth? What's your higher purpose?
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I'm curious on your journey, what what are some of the things that you have done to, as you sort of went down this path of, okay, how do I step into the leadership role and help guide other, girls and young women to tap into their natural born leadership potential? What are some of the takeaways that you have found on that journey that have really helped those who are sort of struggling with this?
Yeah, I think in the spirit of positive heads, the the idea that we can think positive, we can be positive, and the whole idea of positive psychology is so powerful and profound. But one of my biggest takeaways has been understanding how to infuse or integrate the mind power, the cognitive power with the biological responses so that instead of one leading the other or both having these responses that are unhealthy for us, developing personal practices that integrate both of them. So I
Mm-hmm.
think even at the beginning of my own journey of developing like a meditative practice and stuff, first I was an athlete, so everything was about the body.
Yeah.
And then I started to wonder, well, my thoughts are not matching the quality or condition of my physicality. So what the heck is going on? And then there was a flip into, well, just do the mental training. Uh, but that then I started to see an imbalance the other way. So when I work with girls and women, it's really about, again, finding what's your personal practice. Yours, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be mine. My way is not a Bible to
Yep.
impose on you. My life isn't a template for you.
Yep.
But how do we bring these contexts all together so that the
Yeah.
environment around us, the people around us, our mind and our body are all really synced and
Yeah.
working well together?
Yeah.
So that's been one. And the second theme has been men, like the importance of men in the space of women's empowerment,
Mm.
right? So, what are the conversations that men are having? What space do men create to support women? And what's the awareness that men have of the little comments, the little sarcasms,
Yeah.
um, or the intent, right? The opposite, the positive intentionalities and designs that men are creating
Yeah.
for women. And sometimes I find that men have an easier time supporting women's empowerment than women. Sometimes women actually tend to get in the way of
Mm-hmm.
the progress of what they're actually working for because there's too much of the anger, too much of the resentment that they're still holding on to in the body, even though they're thinking through it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been fascinating.
Yeah. I think I've definitely observed, you have, of course, we've all seen like the Me Too movement in
Mhm.
recent years. And I think a lot has come to the surface where it's like, hold on, men really need to reevaluate the way they're interacting with women. And I think as so many of us, male and female, go on this journey of well-being and wellness and becoming and stepping into our greatest and grandest selves and doing the work, it makes it easier. I mean, you know, my I think of, my predecessors, my dad or grandfather. You know, the further I go back, the less respect there was to women, and just sort of like putting them in this lesser than role. And even in like organized religion, I mean, the religion I grew up going to, it's like women aren't allowed to get up and sing, lead a song, or say a prayer, or give a sermon, or it's like it's wild. And as we've continued to like look at this as a culture, and I think it's at least getting easier. And I also observe that There's still plenty of work to do, but it's also getting easier for. I think women, it seems, are more supportive of each other, and less, at least in the community that I'm a part of. It's like, I see so much. I mean, there was just a women's retreat at the property that the space that I live 2 days ago. It's like 50, 75 women all here supporting each other,
Yes.
And in the past, it was like competition over collaboration. And so I feel like we're making great, great strides. And of course, there's plenty more to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's been amazing thinking about I've been married for about 10 years. So
Mm-hmm.
in this reflection of men and women doing this work together, my husband and I have had plenty of conversations about like the beginning of my career. He wasn't quite sure always what I was trying to do, but he supported it. And
Yeah.
as I started to share stories or we listen to music or watch a movie, he'll look at me and say, "This is crazy." And I look back and I just say, "But this is how it is."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I've had conversations like that. I've observed women being treated like that. I've been treated like that. And he says, I just can't fathom it. But then as his awareness has developed, the power in him going to have conversations with other men, right? And we live in a rural Midwest. So,
Mm-hmm.
right, pretty traditional, conservative, old
Mm-hmm.
fashioned, sometimes like we're set back 50 years from the rest of the
Right.
world,
Right.
right? So to have other men that are creating that space too is just amazing.
Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think women are starting to step up and recognize that the competition thing is
Yeah.
not working. It's not doing anything good for anyone. And the modeling that we talked about earlier, if adult women are going to be competing, then of course, why are we seeing it in schools? And why are we seeing it with such young girls?
Yeah.
Someone's teaching them.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are, as they do the work, are coming more into their own power, and there's no longer a need to tear down others and to, I've got to step on you in order to feel good about myself. And so I think there's hope and a lot of progress being made. And, I'm curious what some of the practices or rituals that you recommend to women to kind of, shift this in their own interpersonal world and dialogue, and with how they interact with, other women.
Yeah, so I think just the concept of a pause,
Mm-hmm.
one moment of mindfulness every day, because so many women are trying to do so many things for so many people that usually the first obstacle is time.
Yeah.
So it's always just my first question is, where do you have one moment, one
Mm,
breath? Just start with one breath in the day that can be
mm,
more intentional about you.
mm.
And from that one breath, expand it,
Yeah.
right? When you wake up in the morning, sit at the edge of your bed, don't lay down, like sit up so that your body has moved, because it's got to be the mind body connection, and take one breath. And if all you're doing is observing your breath and your body in that one moment, that's great. That's the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then start to string those moments together.
Yeah.
And start to reflect on, like, right before you start to eat a meal, is this meal out of routine, is it out of emotional reactivity, or is it out of like, this is a meaningful opportunity to break bread and fuel myself?
Yeah.
So it's always the really really simple questions. It doesn't have to be complicated and crazy, but it is totally about listening to what's in your own head. How do you talk to yourself all day? What are the imaginary conversations that you have with other people during the day? Um, and
Yeah.
then,
A
right?
lot of that.
Or the imaginary arguments
Yeah.
that you have with people during the day. What's happening to your body in that space? But the other thing that I think so many women are struggling with is listening to their body instead of judging their body.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have pain or discomfort or all these varying emotional states of being that are presented through the physical self, do you even recognize? Do you think it's just some ailment you've come down with, or have you learned to slow down enough to listen to that and see what your body's telling you? And
Right.
from there, you can explore, you can learn whatever kind of modality or practice you want. And I think that's the whole purpose of this journey of self-care, is that you have your life then to determine what the practices that you want to play around with.
Right. Right.
But it's that listening is where it all starts.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm curious if there's particular, if you have morning rituals and, particular practices that you found to be most beneficial to you on your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I mentioned, because I started my journey as an athlete when I
Mm-hmm.
was in high school, that's when I first discovered yoga and
Mm-hmm.
meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been on this path of creating my own practice of all the different forms of physical movement that I've explored. Um, I I start every single day with something really, really simple and gentle for my body to move. And then I sit back down, I lay back down, I stand up, whatever my body's asking for that day, and go into what do I need? That one, again, one simple question: what do I need the most today? Because we can already see in the morning when we wake up how the mind is positioning us to feel and see and respond to things.
Yeah.
So based on that one question, what do I need today? That's what it is. So there's sometimes I have a planned kind of ritual or routine through the day to take care of myself, but some days I throw it out the window.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you got to be careful with, as they refer to it as the golden handcuffs, where
Yeah.
you get too rigid and rigorous about what you should or shouldn't be doing. And I think that's an
Yes.
important thing on this journey is, not to be too rigid, and to be
Yeah.
willing to mix it up sometimes. And
Hmm.
it's just like if you go to the gym or whatever, it's too much of the same exercise and you get diminishing results. Whereas if you mix it up, it can be really, beneficial and helpful
Yeah.
to your
Yeah. The
growth.
confusion within the mind and body is actually a good thing. The confusion and the chaos
Yeah.
opens up space for deeper learning and more meaningful experiences that surface from that.
Yeah.
And sometimes, as a lot of us have experienced, it gets worse before it gets better when we're
Yeah.
on that journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's, yeah, breakdowns often, come before a breakthrough,
Yeah.
and so when you're having that sort of breakdown confusion moment, remember, like, there's this I must be on the verge of some sort of a breakthrough. And I
Hmm.
found when I weave that narrative, tell that story, um, I truly believe the most important thing that any of us do is what are the stories we weave around the experiences that are happening to us. And that's
Hmm.
one that I've found to be very, very useful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, one of the things I'd love to hear you speak on as well is, how do you know when it's time to refresh, to let go, to move on, in life? Because that's something that we touched on a little bit ago. It seems like a lot of times we build up the sandcastle only to wash away. And, how what is it that you found and done to really, because it's so easy to second guess ourselves too. Like, oh, am I making the mistake? Am I throwing something away that I put so much into, and therefore, I'm misstepping. So I'm curious what you know, how you advise in regards to that.
Well, I think the conversation around stagnancy can come in the form of comfort. So when
Mm-hmm.
you start to feel comfortable after you've had a breakthrough, after you've done a lot of work, there's a like really profound power in resting
Yeah.
and sitting with that for a while. But eventually, like you said, the too much of the same thing
Yeah.
begins to feel kind of stagnant. So when you start to feel restless,
Yeah.
when you start to feel like you're wondering what's next, or you're wondering what the deeper meaning is behind something, that, of course, those are cues to start exploring what's next. And to remember that letting go is really hard. Like the idea of the sandcastle getting washed away after we've done all of that work,
Yeah.
after we've built something up. Can't we keep building onto it, or can't we keep making it better and better? But sometimes the best option is to totally let it go, and just create space for something bigger, for something better, and to move on.
Yeah.
Right. And that doesn't mean that you turn your life upside down and
Yeah.
run away. It literally means let go of the emotionality, let go of the attachment.
Yeah.
And that's been for me one of the hardest things, because at the beginning of all of this for me, that's what I thought it had to be. Like, leave, go away physically, go to a different space. And then suddenly started realizing it's the emotionality, it's the mentality, and restructuring what I already have in my life. I don't have to leave and run away and abandon everything. I can actually face it and let go of what used to be in order to co-create and build what's next.
Yeah, it's really important, and it's one of the hardest things I found in life is to know when, you know, I'm thinking of a Kenny Rogers song from like one of my childhood, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run.
Yes.
It's like, that's the big question. And I think that's where, being with yourself, spending time with yourself, meditation, getting away from, um, a lot of times we're all so empathic, and so making big decisions is hard when you're in the presence of another. Let's say it's a relationship sort of issue, like, is it time to go, is it time to stay? Well, if you're immersed with that person, you're feeling their thoughts and feelings and energy to some degree. And so I
Mhm.
think that's why it's so powerful to get space to be with yourself, so you can get really clear on what is it that you're feeling. Let the water settle, so
Yeah.
the water can become calm, and then see what is coming through. And I think that's one of the best pieces of advice I found, when I don't know what direction to go. Okay,
Mhm.
how do I get really clear with myself and try and sort of remove myself from as much you know outside stimulus, and influence, in order to navigate to the greatest and greatest path for myself.
Yeah. I think that external influence is really, really a tricky, sometimes
Hmm.
a tricky line to walk, right? Because
Yeah.
we want to learn from other people. We want to find mentors and coaches. But again, is that person living my life? No, they might be an expert, so I can take
Yep.
their lessons, but that's another thing that I think too often happens to people is we take the words of a mentor or some famous person, or like a guru in our life, as this is the only way to do it,
Hmm.
and we interpret it through our own lens. We don't necessarily hear the lessons or the messages through them.
Yeah.
So how do we find that path too? But
Yep.
I totally agree, those external influences, they can destroy us instead of
Yeah.
help us grow and move
Yeah.
us forward.
Take them in the right context. And okay, I've heard it, I felt it, I've seen it. Now let me get really clear as I, cook up my own soup of experience. I can maybe add some of those flavors into for consideration. And now, what is it that is the right, recipe for myself?
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'd also love to hear kind of what you share with women, as speaking of following your own guidance. I think
Mhm.
another thing that can be tricky for us to navigate, there's these nuances. Well, what's mine and what's theirs? What's coming from outside influence? What's coming from internal? What's my own intuition telling me? What is actual, maybe subconscious programming from what I was told at 5 years old, that's still,
Mhm.
ringing in my ears and in my heart, and sort of steering the ship? How do you help people to differentiate between intuition and, unconscious, subconscious programming?
A lot of times we start with the simple question of, did I learn this from someone else? or where
Hmm.
did I learn it? A lot of times our answer is I taught myself, which is usually the signal that we are suppressing, repressing, or denying that someone else has influenced us with some kind of programming, right? Because we teach ourselves things to some degree or some extent, but most of the time when we have these kind of existential moments of wondering like what's next or feeling like we're stuck somewhere in life, usually because we're following what someone else has coded within us,
Hmm.
whether it's epigenetically passed down to us or it's from this lifetime and we just don't remember it.
Yeah.
So going back to those quiet moments, creating that space to be with yourself and exploring the learning process. So if you can identify a moment, an emotional charge that comes with some of your thinking, who taught you, where did you learn it, what's the function of it, and what do you want to do with it now?
Yeah.
So ultimately, it has to come down to that personal agency, and starting to get in tune with like the immediate, that first gut kind of response that we get, right? Like when you're taking a test, that old rule of thumb that don't change your answer, don't second guess yourself. Usually, the very first gut reaction
Hmm.
we have is ours. And then the
Right.
things that come in later to say, oh, but is that really the right way? Should we really do that? Those are the
Yeah.
places to start exploring who the heck taught me this? Why
Yeah.
am I still holding on to it? What do I want to do with it?
Right.
Because if I don't want it, I have to own up to the fact that I'm still using it to some extent to hold me
Yeah.
back from what I'm really worth
Yeah.
achieving or being or doing in the world.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I
Hmm.
think, and I think with intuition, it's a lot of times it's like, it's a subtle energy that the more we fine tune ourselves, the more we can recognize, what's coming from our own guidance versus something that's been planted there or someone else's voice. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
it's easy to recognize, oh, that's someone else's voice. They said this about, I remember them saying this and here I am
Yeah.
thinking it, you know?
Yeah.
So, it definitely takes some practice and deep level of awareness to get better at that though.
Yeah. I've also been finding really interesting the power of insights that arise through mindful movement, right?
Mm,
So we can go to the gym and work out and like power through some different exercises. But for anyone who's ever explored like somatic practices, doing movement super, super slow, Zen like movements, and asking one question to set the intention for a movement session, finding responses that come up inside of yourself that have been locked inside of the body.
hmm.
So again, going back to that whole concept of the unity, the connection between the mind and the body, I think that there's no right or wrong way to do it either. Again, you find your own style and flair, but I think that's another space, especially when I work with girls, they are so open to trying different kinds of movement,
Hmm.
dance, yoga, tai chi, whatever, taking
Yeah.
it at different paces and on different planes or whatever with their body. And something gets taken away from us as we grow up where it's like we're afraid to move or we think we can't. So all of that cultural programming,
Yeah.
sometimes it isn't a specific person that's taught us. Sometimes it's the unwritten rules of our
Yeah.
culture and our
Yeah.
society to say, well, you're too old for that now,
Yep.
or women don't do that.
Yeah.
Right? That's not ladylike. That's not what a guy does. You're
Yep.
not
Yep.
tough enough.
Yep.
Any of that kind of subconscious programming in that way as cultural phrasing that we pick up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're totally right. The more, I mean, how many great thinkers have said all their great insights have come when they're not focused on the problem and they're just in the shower or on a walk or on a run or, you
Yeah.
know, it's like kind of, it goes back to this idea we can have what we don't need and we're not trying too hard for. And I
Hmm.
think that's the beautiful thing about any sort of practice or movement. It gets us out of our mind and into our body and into that kind of
Yeah.
more physical flow state.
Yeah. And from there, the power of the mind is just totally unlocked.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'd love to hear any I love good stories. We love good stories on the show, and I'd love to hear maybe more than one. I'd love to hear any stories of sort of hero's journey tale of a woman, a young woman, a girl that you've worked with, and sort of what they faced, what you sort of helped them through, and the inspiration of what came out the other side. I always think we learn so much through storytelling, and we always see ourselves in these stories. So, that, and then of course, soon thereafter, maybe after that, we could go into a little bit of synchronicity storytelling. I love stories of synchronicity, serendipity, positive paranormal stories. So hopefully you got a few inspirational stories up your sleeve.
Yes, it's always really interesting going back into the memory bank, right? And thinking about especially the young women or the girls that I've worked with who realize they might be stuck or they might be facing a challenge in life.
Mm-hmm.
And when they start to go into themselves and start to explore what's really best for them in life, the spaces that they start to put their hands up and say no more,
Yeah.
right? Like, this is my life, this is my time, I'm taking it all back. The fear hasn't been ingrained deeply enough that they're too afraid to do those things.
Yeah.
So I think immediately of a woman that I had been working with recently who she was hired in a position that was like way, way, way below where she should have been working as uh, basically a developer in a city.
Mm-hmm.
And someone was hired over her based on it was a man, so based
Mm-hmm.
on his age, based on some letters and titles after his name, and the story that so many women experience of ending up doing their job plus the job of their boss who has really no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
And this woman beginning to develop her own rituals, her own routines of like waking up in the morning. And her thing was, as soon as I wake up and I turn the doorknob on my front door to take my dogs outside,
Mm-hmm.
it's like that physical sound, that trigger of, instead of triggering, oh my gosh, here we go with the day, it's the trigger of unlocking or literally opening the symbol of opening what's
Mm.
next, what's yet to come today.
Mm. Love that.
And with that really simple thing, every turn of the doorknob, every time that uh, passing through a threshold turned into, instead of the dread of what do I have to do
Wow.
next, it turned into, all right, I've got the next archetype. I can shift into the next role. I can say whatever I need to say. I can speak my truth. I can speak my piece, eventually getting to a point where her position kind of exploded in a really positive way.
Mm.
And as that was happening, people were starting to realize how she was being disempowered.
Mm.
And she walked away from the job just a couple
Mm.
of months later and
Wow.
was hired kind of into a dream job that she got to design as she went along. She got to grow it however she wanted to do it, and shifted into a space where those practices then, if she didn't need those specifically, she knew exactly what it was to create the next level of her practice. Right. So it's these stories of meaning, stories of letting go, right? What we talked about earlier, letting go and being okay with, I don't have any idea what's coming next, but if I let all of it go, something bigger and better than what I'm dreaming about is going to open up for me. And it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Trusting that process. And I love what you just mentioned there. It's like taking something that could easily be turned into the dread of opening the door into a day in life that I don't, is not fulfilling and feels disempowering, to I'm going to tell a different story. This sound actually means opening up new doors of opportunity and something to now instead trigger excitement in myself for. And
Yeah.
that excitement is where all the power comes from. That is, that is actually, what is leading to laying the foundational, the foundation, the bricks of that new opportunity that ended up ultimately manifesting. And
Yes.
so it's like we are empowered from wherever we are to tell a new narrative around the nature of the situation in which we find ourselves. And that's a wonderful, wonderful example of that.
Hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful, and like we talked about earlier, it tends to be those simple things, the really, really consistent discipline that you create for yourself. And going into even thinking about a discipline, you have to be disciplined to do this, but that word discipline, does it trigger you? Does having
Yeah.
a personal practice and being a disciplined person in some way, shape, or form have an emotional charge for you?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times as we grow and learn, we start to say, well, that didn't work for me, so I'm going to totally throw it out, instead of recontextualizing it exactly as you're saying
Yeah.
about
Right.
those little tiny moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear any other story that you may have. My go-to story of synchronicity or serendipity or positive paranormal story. Do you have anything like that up your sleeve?
I feel like every single day it's like a
Mm-hmm.
walking, talking, full life moment of serendipity and synchronicity. But I had a mentor. Like, I always used to think of synchronicity as coincidences that mean something,
Mm-hmm.
but I learned a little bit different definition to that has been really intriguing to me, where synchronicity is out of order events. Like
Mm.
in our brain, when we want to try to plan something linearly and think we're going to
Mm-hmm.
get from point A to point B this way.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for me, these moments have been more like um, just recalling like an individual person, or these moments of deja vu throughout my life that have resurfaced years later, right? Like meeting a certain person or having someone say, you have this powerful gift, or you have this skill, or I love what you say about whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't see you doing it as you're doing it now for very much longer. Like, I had people say that to me when I was teaching, you're going to do something that doesn't exist yet.
Mm. Mm.
You're going to take it into a different realm or a different world. And then all of a sudden, a few years later, an offer is made,
Yeah.
right? So, um, of the stories are running through my brain, but I just keep thinking of the themes and patterns of synchronicity and serendipity.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, more so than those very specific examples. And
Mm.
back to the idea of intuition, as we talked about,
Yep.
no, really, really learning in the last few years that if I'm not listening to that, if I hear it and I second guess it, whatever I decide to do for the next month or years, perhaps, it doesn't matter in my life. I always come full circle somehow,
Yeah.
right? Whatever I had envisioned X number of years ago, somehow I clean everything up and come back to it, and I'm poised in an even better position
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
move forward.
That's the thing is no matter what our challenges are, um, and how things unfold, I find that yeah, I'm constantly getting better through it.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to be aware of. Yes,
Mhm.
life is challenging. Life it can be challenging and hardship is an inevitable part of it. And, you know, your smooth sea is never made for a skilled sailor and you're constantly becoming a more skilled sailor. And so if you
Yes.
can trust that process, you can stop having all the anxiety around, you know,
Mhm.
what's to come that may be challenging. That idea that worry is a poor use of imagination, and instead
Mm.
being a courageous being and knowing that like it may not be easy, just like going to the gym today, but it'll be worth it. What it the outcome. So
Mhm.
I think that yeah, very very well said. And yeah, this has been an awesome conversation. I'm curious, for those who want to connect and continue to follow you and your work, what is the best way to do that?
My website is samanthalouise.co. So you can go there, find me, check out my social media through there. I also have a monthly first Friday of each month, a
Hmm.
group called Brave Girls. It has
Mm,
morphed into Brave Girls and Brave Moms.
cool.
So anyone that ever wants to join that, it's free of charge. It's just an open community space for moms and daughters to explore selfhood, to build healthy sisterhood community, and to learn how to stay connected as mothers and daughters.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your wisdom. And I do have one final question for you today, my cliche closer. And it is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Samantha Louise?
Ooh, the meaning of life is to make being you your professional job for the rest of your life.
Ooh, yes, I fully resonate with that. We all have a unique path that no one, I believe, is more suited for than
Mhm.
we are. You know, and
Yes.
and just starting with that story is the first step to getting in alignment with the uncovering of what that is.
Mhm.
And you know, knowing that you are more worthy than as worthy as any other being ever has been, could be, or will be, and not needing it all to show up at once. Just like you don't listen to a song to get to the final note, you don't dance to get to a certain spot on the dance floor. Allowing the process to unfold and enjoying the ride. The journey is the goal, and you inevitably stepping into that unique position that it's no one has ever been more qualified for than you is inevitable if you relax and enjoy the journey along the way, I believe.
Yes, I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to take that with me. I love it.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Far and wide. Let's get it out there. We're doing it together. And thank you all for doing this along with us and expanding and growing and shifting our perspectives. So proud of you and so honored to be a part of your life. And thanks for showing up. All of you, Samantha, you as well. Until next time, journey well. Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key audio or ebook as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the Golden Key code POSITIVEHEAD. And please, if you enjoy my gift, leave a positive review on Amazon so others can find the book and unlock their lives with the help of the Golden Key as well.